How's it going, everybody? As I mentioned last week in my video about the House of the Dragon series and how I felt about it, I mentioned that I was going to be doing a weekly episodic review series here on the channel, and that is where we're starting today, episode 1. Now, a little bit of a precursor here before we start. I have never read the book that this show is based off of, so I have no knowledge of anything in that regard. That's why I felt like that was important to say, because I might be saying some things that it's like if you read the book, I would know this, but did not read the book, so nothing like that. And I've never done this type of review process before. I've never been like try to do like a critical review of things. I'm always one of those people. I mentioned it before as well. Very simple-minded when it comes to TV shows. If I enjoy it and it's entertaining, I like it. I don't like try to think too deep, but I wanted to try to do that with this show. So yeah, let's jump right into my review of episode 1. Now, before we start, I do got to give that spoiler warning. This is going to be a review of the episodes in depth. I'm not going to dance around any spoiler stuff, so we're going full on spoilers with all of this. So, my understanding of this first episode. So it starts out, and I didn't catch it till the second time I watched it, where the narrator to start is Rhaenyra herself, who of course is the little girl in the show. It was funny. I noticed the first thing when you first actually see her after the intro sequence, she gets off the dragon, looked like obviously a smaller version because she's younger, but looked just like Daenerys. I think that's kind of who they were modeling the character after. Obviously, all the Targaryens, the white hair, they all kind of look the same. Instantly, what I thought of when I saw that, I thought they looked very, very similar. So now, going back to that intro sequence, I think the intro sequence really gave us a hint, and again, haven't read the book, really gave us a hint into what this show is going to be about, because Rhaenyra, as she was talking, she said the only thing that could destroy the Targaryen dynasty is the Targaryen itself. So my premonition from this first part of it, and again, if you read the book, if you read the books, you know this already. It feels like it's probably setting up for a civil war in some way, and from what I saw later on in the episode, I would double down on that for sure. So let's kind of get into it a little bit. Let's get into. I want to start off with some of the characters, and the characters will pertain into some of the story stuff as we go along. So it starts out you get to know like the core group of characters to start. Obviously, Rhaenyra, who you can just tell with her being the narrator and everything, this is who the story is going to be based around. And again, later on in the episode, you learn the same thing. You meet King Viserys, who obviously, that is the name of Daenerys' brother as well, which is the first thing I picked up on when they mentioned his name. So he kind of starts out. You don't really know how to feel about him, because he seems pretty lighthearted in the first time you see him sitting with his council. So when you first meet him, you're just like, okay, so he seems like, I mean, he's not. I don't think he's as like laid back as Robert Baratheon was, but it is also hinted somewhat early that he is looking to have a true heir because he did not have a son. Later on in the episode, his wife mentions that she had been pregnant 5 times. They only had the one daughter that we know of, and the other babies were miscarriages or stillborn. So kind of an unfortunate situation to learn about there, which again ends up being a bit of foreshadowing, which I think was really, really cool. So I mean, at first you kind of get that feeling too that, you know, Viserys being laid back is also kind of, I mean, I don't want to call him a fool, but, you know, he's joking around a lot, and that's kind of the character you get on him at first, but he seems super likable, right? So he seems like one of those guys that he's not, you know, not too harsh, but it's in, you know, him and his hand, they seem to get along very well. So start off, Viserys seems like a really cool character. Then you get to the mention of his brother and Daemon, and no one knows much. You know, you don't know much about him to start. They just kind of said he's off in a different area at the moment. But you find out very quickly that he was back and he was sitting in the throne, which when you see that, the younger brother who, you know, they mentioned later on he had a couple different positions. Later on he does mention that Viserys tried to send him away. Obviously, he ended up being the leader of the Kingsguard, or the Gold Cloaks as they called them. So, but seeing him, knowing he's not in a position of power, really, like he's not the hand of the king, and sitting in that chair, you're just like, okay. And they even mention it. They mentioned, like, I think Rhaenyra and I can't remember what her guard's name was, but they go in there and they're just kind of like, oh boy, what's he doing? And of course, you know, after seeing that, the opinion you get is kind of that he wants to be on the Iron Throne, right? We all know that the younger brother just wants, you know, so he's hoping that the birth ends up being a girl or not happening, so that he can be the rightful heir to the throne. And just look at this guy. Put him up on the screen right here. He just looks like the bad guy. And that's the first thing I really noticed when I saw him too. It's like right off the bat, they're like, okay, this guy just seems off. And then you see, his punishment tactics when it comes to, obviously he said that his brother's city was running amok with criminals, and they were having the tournament to celebrate the new heir to the throne, the new child of the king. So he's like, do you really want your place to be run with criminals? And as they saw, there's a lot of things going on there. He maimed a lot of people, killed a lot of people as well, cut limbs off and stuff, depending on what their crimes were. You just get that feeling like right off the bat, you just like, I don't like this guy. And then you realize very quickly he's unfaithful to his wife, of course. Hangs out in the whorehouses on the Silk Alley, I think is what they call it. So you just get, right from the start, you just get the feel. And then you see him, of course, in the jousting tournament. He's wearing all the black, and you just look at him, and you're just like, this guy just screams villain to me. You feel like he's going to be a very big villain in the show. And right off the bat, too, when you hear about that, you realize him and the Hand of the King, Otto Hightower, they don't get along. They do not see eye to eye, which is also brought in later on with the joust, how he picked his, he picked Otto's son to joust again. So there's another form of tension you feel right there. So you're already feeling like a lot of the characters in the show coming together, and there's this big ball of tension between a lot of different characters. And it's this first episode, it's hard to judge off a first episode. It's hard to give any sort of grading because a lot of the first episode is going to be like formation of the story, which by the end of this episode, you see it. They got 10 episodes to tell the whole story, and you see it at the end of the first episode that they're building towards something. So throughout all these different areas, you learn a lot about all the people. And again, so it's like you start off first half of the episode. Rhaenyra has a friend of hers, which I think will end up forming into some sort of a love story, which could end up messing with things later on. Be interesting to see where they take that story. But the first half of the episode, you get initial feelings about a lot of the characters. So my initial thought was, not a lot of big name characters. You got the mom, who she's just the mom. You don't feel one way or the other about. You just know she said a part of the story though. She did her biggest point was just saying, like, with all the bad luck we've had with children, this is my last one. If this one doesn't work out, it's not a boy. You're out of luck, son. You're out of luck, buddy. So, and that kind of, we'll get into that as well. But so like the mom, Rhaenyra, and King Viserys and his hand, and the guard that guards Rhaenyra, you're like, okay, these people seem pretty cool. And then on the flip, then you got some of the other council members who seem, of course, the council members, they're always depicted as having the best interest in mind, which is their job to steer the king in the right direction. And then obviously you got Daemon, who like I said, I did not like him to start. Obviously, Viserys plays like the older brother, because he is the older brother. To where Otto, after what he did to the people that night, he says, like, this can't be the type of guy we have in this spot. He's gonna end up doing something foolish. It's just not gonna work out. He just doesn't, with the way he does things, it just isn't gonna work. And then so that obviously, as I talked about, tensions there. Then after that, then things get a little wild. Viserys, in my mind, that flipped, because again, this is a spoiler thing. So he found out that there was gonna be another issue with the birth of his child, and then so his Grand Maester gives him. Obviously, this part was it flipped the character for me, because this part, he said there's two or three options here. One, you just let it work out, and odds are you'll lose the child. You might lose your wife, but she might live. You lose them both. Or they do what I assume would have been today called the C-section, and they cut the baby out, which that's the choice he took. Very graphic scene. It's a sad scene because his wife is obviously, she kind of knows what's happening, panicking, screaming. It was sad to watch. And to me, I don't know how it was with other people, but for me, that really turned my opinion of Viserys' character around. And then you notice the attitude change after that. Obviously, once that happens, everybody at the joust is informed. People start to pan out, and then his daughter finds out, and it was just, that part was just, that was the turn of the story, the season, just because, and that's where we'll get into I'll get into next here in my review of the episode. The Grand Maester's holding the baby, says you have a son, and then you kind of notice something was off with the way the Grand Maester is holding, or Grand Maester is holding the baby. And then next thing you see is a funeral scene where there's a full-size adult and a smaller pyre set up. And this is really where the story takes a drastic turn. Obviously, Viserys, his attitude changes after this. The decision he made, they both ended up dying anyway. You feel a little bit of resent that Rhaenyra felt for it, just with the look she was giving him. And then part of the thing she said to Daemon, her uncle, was, I hope my father found happiness in the hours that my brother was alive. So obviously a little bit of resent there because she found out what happened. And then she ends up the classic the classic Targaryen Dracarys to have the dragon burn the pyres in their funeral service and whatever. It was a really, really deep cutting scene. And obviously they get to a point. So obviously from there, I mean, you feel a little bit of pity for Viserys, but he also made the decision. So his character, I feel like, is kind of a downturn. I realized that I don't like many of the characters in this show. Rhaenyra, her friend, Otto, I almost had a small issue with because his daughter, and maybe there's something, maybe I didn't catch it, maybe this actually is what happened, but he told his daughter to go comfort the king and wear one of your mother's dresses. So when I heard that, I'm like, bro, are you really like your daughter out to this old king? From what I understand, that's not the way it went. I didn't think the king would go through with that, but I almost didn't like Otto after that. And then, speaking of Otto, that brings us into the next section when they're having their next meeting soon after, and they start talking about the succession plan. And this is really where you start to see the change in Viserys, where he's short-tempered, obviously, yelling at all of it, yelling at Otto, Hightower, yelling at all the other members of the council, saying like, what are you guys bringing this up to me now? My wife and child, they're still burnt, like they're still out there. And then Otto brings up the fact about his brother and says like, your brother isn't a good heir, you need to find a true heir. And then this is where you find out, he says like, Otto, it was your choice to give him the Kingsguard. And but this is then where you find out that, because this cuts away to a scene of Daemon at the whorehouse again. You find out later from Otto that he had some spies there, and it was a celebration of heir for a day, which was the king's son who passed on. This gets back to Viserys, and this is where you get to see more of that change. Obviously, for a long time, he was trying to protect his brother. And then this time, when he found out about that, he called a meeting, sent his brother off, very angry. And this is the turn. Obviously, an event happened. He was, kind of here, like not foolish, but a little more lighthearted. And this whole event happens by his own doing, and it's just like his, ramps up to 1,000,000. During this meeting, you can just start again more of the tension between the two. You start to Daemon says you're weak, and this is what you always kind of figured Daemon thought of Viserys. So. And then that happens, he sends him away, and then kind of the big moment that really is going to set up the show, and it's going to lead to issues down the road because of kind of what they were talking about. Viserys decides to name Rhaenyra the heir to the throne, and a couple of his council people say, like, a woman's never sat on the throne before. This isn't what they're supposed to do. Why change hundreds of years of what we've been doing? It's going to cause a stir. He goes through with it anyway, and she just you notice with her, like, she kind of is that mix of Bran and Arya in a way, from what you know about her now. Like with Bran, beginning she was on the dragon, she likes adventure. Her mom wasn't happy with her being up on the dragon, kind of like Bran, how his mom wasn't happy with her walking around, climbing buildings and whatnot. And then also like Arya, where she doesn't want to rule anything, she just wants to adventure, she wants to explore things, kind of like Arya wanted to do. She just didn't really want to be she didn't want to be a lady, any of that type of stuff. She just wanted to go out exploring. So you kind of feel like she's that mix of those two with the Daenerys, because when she finds out, when her father tells her this, that he wants her to rule, she seems okay with it. So Daenerys is kind of that same way. She wants to change things, she wants to be in charge. So this is really like, so that it really ended with a culmination of, he started out by getting the backstory of all the characters, learning about them, and then it puts them all in these situations to where it's going to carry on throughout the rest of the episode. And I do got to say, the first episode to me, very good. One more thing I wanted to mention, they tie it into Game of Thrones a little bit, because he says there's one thing that you need to know though, if you are to rule, and that someday the long winter will come, and whatever is north, we don't know what it is, but it'll come and it'll wipe out the Age of Men. So you need a Targaryen needs to be on the throne, which ends up happening to fight the White Walkers later on. A Targaryen needs to be on the throne to unite the people. Obviously, probably has something to do with dragons, fire, and the White Walkers. Was probably the connection there. So he mentions that, he says it's called the Song of Ice and Fire, and every king has this and they know about it. So, and obviously we knew about that beforehand from Game of Thrones, of course, even with Robert Baratheon, which was also another funny point I wanted to bring up. A little hint there is during the joust, one of the fighters was a Baratheon and asked for the girl. I think it was Rhaenyra's friend, asked her for her blessing for the fight or whatever, and then Otto leans into Viserys and he's like, "Oh, those Baratheons and their smooth tongues," and then Viserys says, "Yeah, but it doesn't matter how good their tongues are. They're not going to switch up the lineage of the throne." And obviously, as we know, 200 years later, Baratheon ended up taking over taking down a Targaryen to take control of the throne. Thought that was kind of a fun little tie in there. But overall thoughts about the first episode. It's very hard to come up with any sort of grading system after one episode. I think I'll say that for the end of the season. I'm going to give my thoughts. I thought this was a very, very good start. Again, it didn't have that same pull that Game of Thrones had, but obviously it might be something with us knowing what Game of Thrones is now as a show, and then this one is, kind of something weird like that. But at the same time, I thought it's a good start. I think it shows a ton of promise. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm going to have fun reviewing these. This episode, I don't know if this is how I'm going to structure. I just want to start out by kind of explaining the story, then getting into the characters and my thoughts on the progression of the characters so far. Maybe I'll structure my reviews like that. I'm going to see how this one does, and from there kind of come up with a better plan for the rest of them. Obviously, like I said, one episode, hard to have a full plan because now it's just like the first episode is just that building of the world we're in, characters and all that type of stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like. Let me know your thoughts on my thoughts down in the comments. If I missed anything, let me know about that. If you guys, let me know, and if you guys watch this, let me know how you think it should be structured. If I did it right this time, or if maybe I should change it up and just maybe be a little more critical of the show and not explain the story, because odds are if you're watching this, you already saw it. The most importantly, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode next week. Thanks for watching.